morale. And also when we talk of quality, we are looking at the financing of education, where the government takes major steps in financing of education rather than the parents contributing 80% of the education system. So when we talk of quality, we are looking at a number of aspects which are very important and very, very indispensable. So in short, I would say that's what we would mean by quality.
And Mr. Gwatiza, from a civil society perspective, what is the understanding that is there in terms of quality education, and how have we gone as Zimbabwe in ensuring that all learners access quality education as propounded by SDG 4?
The statement of the SDG 4 is looking for access by all to quality education. It's important that we understand that quality education has to be put into context depending on the geographical location and the nation that we will be talking about. Education has to be relevant to the needs of the country. Education has to be seen as a lifelong process.
Yes.
A process that of itself must have quality in it, and the product of that process must also have quality in it. So we're now looking at the learning outcomes that we want to see and associate with our reference to quality education. We have traditionally have significant focus on the content and factual recall. With changes in a continuously changing world, we're finding that in as much as content is important, there are skills and competencies that we want our learners to emerge from the education process and to attain on an ongoing basis that are relevant, for instance, to building the economy, that are relevant to sustaining happiness in citizens. So as the Honorable has said, it's very important that we break down that process and make sure we have fine-tuned the curriculum, we have fine-tuned the financing of education, the provision, the facilities, the welfare of the learners, to a point where we are supporting innovation, creativity, problem solving, understanding of content and application of that content in learners from the early childhood development right through to post-tertiary levels. So quality education is an important aspect that must be unpacked with respect and sensitivity.
And from your own perspective, since 2015, where are we as a country in trying to make sure that every child, gets that quality education?
It's a road that we continue to travel. There's national circumstances that hamper the provision of access for all, girls and boys alike. And we are, as a nation and as civil society, working with government to make sure that we identify the challenge and have the appropriate policy responses to addressing that. You will have read recent statistics on the shortage of schools, the distances that people in rural areas, for instance, travel, the recent experience of COVID-19 and how online learning could have been a solution, but there were other infrastructural challenges where people in certain areas couldn't even access radio, for instance. So we are traveling that road. We have challenges, different challenges. As I said, we have to take the context of the nation. We have new settlements, established settlements where communications infrastructure is yet to reach. We have a response by certain sections of the international community to our local initiatives in terms of land reform, land distribution, and foreign policy, which has put an albatross on our economic well-being. And that way, the cake that government and the fiscus has to distribute for different priorities has shrunk. And the percentage that's going to education is going almost entirely to staffing issues and still falling short of meeting the objective that the Honorable referred to, that our teaching community, our teachers, our facilitators have to be well resourced and capacitated to receive children and focus on their development, to receive learners and avail to them an opportunity to own schools in a holistic manner. So we are traveling that road. We are aiming for SDG 4 goals, but we will not underestimate the challenges that we are facing, and pat ourselves on the back on the successes that we've achieved on that path.
Your own assessment, Honorable, in terms of how we have fared as a country in terms of achieving SDG 4, especially on quality education?
It has not been an easy task to implement SDG 4 that speaks to provision of quality, inclusive education. There are a number of challenges that have been experienced along the way since 2015. One of the challenges is the issue of the economic meltdown, which has impacted negatively on the implementation of SDG 4. When we talk of economic meltdown, we are talking of hyperinflation, drought, and so forth, even the floods that we have experienced in Zimbabwe. We also, some of the challenges include the issue of COVID-19, which has presented both opportunities and challenges. Opportunities in the sense that we had to revisit the way in which the pedagogy of operation, the teaching method had to change. Instead of embarking on the physical teaching, we had to resort to online learning. But that also, whilst it's an opportunity, it has also presented some challenges. One of the challenges is access to gadgets. How many students are able to buy computers, for example, to buy smartphones? In rural areas, it's even worse. Worse in the sense that the internet connectivity is a challenge. Some of the rural areas do not even have boosters, and that presents a number of problems. And also the other challenge is the issue of the time when schools were closed. Quite a number of students had to drop out of school. We have heard of more than 5,000 students who dropped out of school in 2020 as a result of early pregnancies and also early marriages, child marriages. That has impacted negatively on implementation of SDG number 4. But however, attempts have been made by the government to try to implement quality education through the provision of social safety nets. One of the social safety nets includes the issue of BEAM. Those underprivileged students have been provided with funding by the government. In the rural areas, those districts that have been regarded as poor, they've been provided with what we call grant in aid. Those are very important innovations, but there are a number of challenges associated with those innovations. For example, delayed disbursements of funds for both BEAM and also grant in aid. So, but as a committee representing the interests of learners in Parliament, we are advocating for improvements in the implementation of quality education. What by improvements we are saying, whilst we appreciate that we want competencies that are people-centered, where students are able to learn through discovery, through research and innovation. We, as a committee, we want to encourage our schools or the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education to embrace on Education 5.0, just like what is being practiced in higher and tertiary education. We don't want a student who simply regurgitates information. As students, after completing O-level or A-level, is a job seeker.
Yeah.
The type of education that we want, which constitutes quality, is that of a student who gets those competencies, who has skills inculcated on that particular individual, is able to become a job creator, can solve problems.
At all level.
Yes, at all level. I was lucky to have witnessed exhibitions at the World Literacy Day, where I saw Form 3 students innovating. I saw some students who are able to produce grinding mills, models of grinding mills, shelling machines, simple models of that. But all that needs funding. So as a committee, it's our clarion call that we are discussing the 2023 budget.
Yeah.
For us to achieve quality in terms of education delivery, it means education has to be funded.
Yes.
Funded wholly by the government. The 2023 budget must speak to the issue of government providing free basic compulsory education.
But before we get there, Honorable, do you think we do have enough policy frameworks in place to make sure that all these things that we are talking about, the models that you're talking about, actually come into place?
There are limitations in terms of policy frameworks. Is something that has to be done. But what we are going to do as a committee, remember, we do oversight role. That's the duty of us as parliamentarians. When we realize that there are gaps, we are able to invite the Honorable Minister, the PS, to our committee. Then when they appear before our committee, we are able to invoke Section 119 of the Constitution that speaks to government departments and agencies being accountable to Parliament. So we have to put in place frameworks which would lead to the provision of free basic education. But the other most important thing, very fundamental thing, is the issue of funding. Let's go a step further and embark on resource domestic mobilization, so that the government must provide resources from the fiscus.
Yeah.
If the cake is small, let's collect some taxes. Just yesterday, I presented my report in the House, and we said we want value-added tax, a certain percentage of VAT going towards provision of free basic state-funded education. Yes.
I see, Mr. Gwatidzo, you were itching to come in.
There are a number of themes that the Honorable touched on, which from a civil society perspective, we're very passionate about. We, in the SDG 4, the mention is of an education that is free. And we're very keen that we have a shared view on what we mean by free education. Is this tuition free? Are we meeting all the requirements of the learners at a cost? Does government have the capacity to meet that cost? And if they don't, how do we supplement that cost so that the learners and the guardians and parents of those learners are then not finding a situation or coming into a situation where learners are being withdrawn from school, or we're having dropouts because the financial capacity is not there.
Yeah.
So that's one that I was very keen to present and say. Free education must be understood. Where does it start from and where does it end? The interventions, you mentioned the policy framework, the interventions on the basic education assistance model, BEAM, and on the grants to the schools are important. But if you look at the statistics, you still find that paying for education is a burden that parents are carrying way beyond half the cost.
Yeah.
So that's an important acknowledgement from a civil society. So we continue to have policies that respond to that. I did say earlier that we must...
And probably to add on to say, even the Constitution provide for that free education.
Of course.
Even the Education Act provides for that free education.
Of course.
And, actually the ministry coming up with the school financing policy and trying to make sure that the education gets free to everyone. Yeah.
Not to take anything away from what you said, the president has also announced and pronounced himself on the intention to make sure that education, basic education, is free. So it's important we have a shared understanding of what do we mean by free, what do we mean by basic education. And in the Zimbabwe context, there's no doubt that starting from early childhood development right through to, say, O-level, we need interventions that ensure that we are offering a quality education to everyone.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I'm coming from the Coalition of Civil Society Operators in Education. We have our members operating in different and focusing on different aspects. But one of our members who focuses on the relevance of education gave a very good example of how in Zimbabwe we should have learners graduating from O-level fully appreciative of the mineral wealth of this country, how endowed we are as a nation, how we should add value to those resources so that we take our place in the community of nations. So if you take an education curriculum that's designed for a developed country, you'll find that it will not be speaking to this. So the relevance of that education is paramount. And the Honorable touched on that. I was very pleased to hear him say that. We don't want to produce people who are looking for an employer. We want to produce entrepreneurs. We want to produce people who will see the value in the lithium beyond the export of the raw lithium.
True.
And know that this is underpinning such important technological developments, including space travel. So we want to have an education system that is relevant in the 21st century to Zimbabwe.
And relevant to the context of Zimbabwe.
That's right. And the policy frameworks are in place. You alluded to it. The legislation is in place. We've seen a revision of the curriculum. We're wanting to see a continuing revision of that curriculum. We want to make sure that even our training of teachers gives them such broad skills that they can receive learners and help the learners broaden their learning skills, their critical thinking, their problem-solving skills, and are able to be serious economic players, serious social players, visionaries, grounded in Ubuntu. Because here's another strength that we have as a country. We are generally people who have empathy for one another, and we want to see an education system that builds on that strength and allows us to move away from parts of polarization and unnecessary conflict or emulation of historical success, maybe redefining our own success for our students. And this is where the education system really underpins what we become as a people. The quality of education is there defining the quality of life and the quality of our situation as Zimbabweans.
And I like the fact that you brought in the issue of linking our education to Ubuntu. And our Nzira Mashanga Commission report speaks to that.
Absolutely.
And also, if you look at the curricula itself, the new curricula that is being implemented by the ministry itself, it speaks to that. But the challenge that is there, as you've alluded to, both of you have spoken about financing as a challenge. What do we do to make sure that we fully finance our education with resources that we get locally, domestically? What do we do as a nation? Where do we go from now? I give an example. You spoke of the pronouncement by the president for free education next year, but the budget is not indicating. And from the meetings that we had with Parliament, with Ministry, it's an issue of resources. What do we do?
I think we need a trust fund of some sort, where we bring everybody on board. We bring civil society, Parliament, teachers. Everyone must be brought on board. Then we discuss to find a way forward. The other very important issue is to engage the President of the Second Republic, Dr. Emmerson Mnangagwa. The commitment that he has made is very important.
Yes.
It has to be fulfilled. Let's have an engagement with him collectively, so that we have a meeting with him. We can invite him to a conference on education financing. We come up with trust funds where civil society organization may have resources, put resources together, which will also go towards education financing. So in a way, that's the first suggestion that I want to put across, that let's engage His Excellency the President. The other is for us to interrogate the issue of domestic resource mobilization. That's a very critical issue. When we talk of domestic resource mobilization, we are saying, just like what Mr. Gwatizo mentioned, he said, with all these endowments, we have more than 40 minerals. Zimbabwe is not a poor country. Of late, we're excited by the results from the explorations happening in Mzarabani, where if we get oil, we want that written down, that more than 60% of the revenue coming from oil reserves should go towards education financing. We want taxes to be levied on companies that are exporting raw ore. Those companies must be encouraged to smelt locally, instead of pursuing underdevelopment or neocolonialism. One of the facets of neocolonialism is through export of raw materials. And that underdevelops a country. So in a way, we are saying those companies that are involved in mining of platinum, like Zimplats, Unki, you name them. A heavy penalty must be, a heavy tax must be levied on those companies, so that they are encouraged to process, to smelt the ore here. And that creates more jobs. I've given an example of the ore that is transported to South Africa, of platinum ore, where they will get more than 10 other minerals over and above the platinum that
and is it stemming from the quality of the education that we do not have the understanding to say, then when they go to South Africa, they are exploiting other minerals that are coming from there? Is it coming from the quality of our education, or what is it all about?
It's all about the realization that what is happening is not good. That is a facet of quality education.
True.
So let them process those minerals here, so that the byproducts, goods and services that are produced out of those industries, they finance education, and that leads to quality.
Mr. Gwatizo, from a civil society perspective,
Well, I want first to thank Honorable Moyo for his erudite explanation on the need for local financing for education. You can't receive money from external sources and then put a local direction to it.
True.
Yeah, you know this very.
It always comes with conditions.
Well, they have he who pays the piper calls the tune,
Yeah.
as has always been said, and we'll have to be very adroit at managing to do that. But why do we go in that direction and not use our own funds to achieve our own goals? And I'm privileged to sit with Honorable Moyo on a national task force that as civil society we were part and instrumental in creating. That task force is looking at the establishment of a statutory fund that mobilizes domestic resources and make sure that we have sufficient financing for our intentions is partly captured by the SDG 4. But what is important that underlines all that is that stakeholders in the country have to understand the importance of education. You were saying, is it a result of the quality of education that we ended up where we are? Of course it is. How many people are found know that in 1896, when we were prosecuting our first Chimrenga, in 1896, the Ethiopians were defeating the Italians when they were trying to colonize them. This is the type of education which our children should have. So we liberate them from the experiences of the colonial system and its legacy and its intentions in our country. Liberate them into reaching for the skies. So we have the next Bill Gates's, Elon Musk's, coming from within the children who are benefiting from a quality education in Zimbabwe.
Honorable Moyo.
I think is a way forward. We want to ensure that we invite civil society to have an engagement, which is very important, so that we come up with ways of urging the government to collect revenue. And that is very important, especially in the provision of quality education. The other aspect which is very important, which we should not forget to mention, is the issue of inclusive education. Let's not forget the students who are disabled. If we collect a lot of revenue, those students, they need help the most. They are the most disadvantaged. Take, for example, a blind student, or somebody who is in a wheelchair, or somebody who has a problem of pigmentation. They would need resources for them to realize quality education. So let's embrace this issue of domestic resource mobilization so that we assist.
I see everything hinges on resources. But as we conclude, let me ask a very specific question. The president has announced the free education next year. But in the budget, we haven't seen a provision within the budget where the Minister of Finance is providing for that financing for free education. What have you done as a committee to make sure that it becomes a reality? Because we haven't seen it in the budget.
There is a section which speaks to free basic education. But what we are saying, the amount that has been set aside is very insignificant. 1 billion is nothing. So as a committee, we have presented in the House our report that speaks to inadequate allocation of funds by Treasury. And we have made some suggestions on how how resources can be mobilized to provide free basic state-funded education. The issue of VAT, value-added tax, the issue of mineral taxes, as a way of collecting revenue to finance basic state-funded education. From VAT, our calculation is that we can get 25 billion
which
from value-added tax, but still it falls short of our expectations as a committee. So that's where we want those companies that are heavily involved in extractive industry should come in and also finance education through a number of taxations. I think in short, that's my conclusion.
Mr. Gwatidzo, what is civil society offering to make sure that this becomes a reality?
It all starts from everyone appreciating the importance of education and how that is the transformative engine for all the goals that we seek as a nation. Then we have to have shared values around that. There isn't a dichotomy between government and civil society or non-state actors. We are together in this. We are working together. We are working with government. And with the reason why we are looking for a statutory fund is that we anticipate tax reform, and that is the purview of government. But we're also engaging with other actors in the broad range of non-state actors. Ordinary farmers are building schools on their farmland for their committees. Communities themselves are building schools. And we are finding businesses are employing the products of education. So everyone has a role to play. Indeed, we could even look at examples recently of teachers going to work in Rwanda, or people from this country going to work in places like the UK providing services there. We've got many instances of where our products in our education systems are actually pivoting, lots of significant things happening out there. We could also try and tap from that and bring resources to the country. So the important thing is everyone must appreciate the nature and role of education. And then let's work together to make sure that we have the education that we want. You know, and when we take from the SDG 4 pronouncement from a collective of the family of nations, we must always domesticate that to say, what does it mean for us here? Because there's a whole geopolitical scenario where nation states are pursuing their interests, including behind the UN. We must make sure we are very clear. We have a collective as Zimbabweans of what is our national interest, what is in our national interest, and how do we attain it. I have no doubt in my mind that we will find that education is one of the areas that we must put a lot of our effort, a lot of our attention, a lot of our resources in to be able to attain our vision, be it a vision 2030, be it a shared vision with Africa for 2063, be it vision at individual levels. The pivot is education.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, Mr. Gwatidzo. We have come to an end of our program today, where we were discussing quality education, the achievement that Zimbabwe has made, the challenge that has been there, and we have seen that the major challenge that has been highlighted is the challenge of financing, and we are happy that the government is working on making sure that financing of education is improved. My name is Clement Lizio. Till we meet again. Bye-bye.